So we're talking about something different. How do you supercharge your impact so that you're having the kind of impact that really makes a difference?
It starts 30 years ago, recognizing that to be successful, I needed to rely on the people around me, not just on the skill or the capabilities that I had. When we think about where we have the most success in our leading indicators, being able to really expand and capitalize on that is what we have found to be almost a secret formula. What very few organizations measure is how fast the bucket is leaking. That is kind of the systems thinking part that we really want to emphasize. It's way too easy for us to say that employee is not doing, but the much more difficult thing is to ask, how did the system that created the circumstances for that employee not work?
Not everybody doing the work has a good perspective. How do I start to know who I listen to and who I don't listen to?
So it's important to recognize that the people who are doing the work who may not have a good perspective, you have to ask the question.
There is no growth in comfort and no comfort in growth. Yet the big leaps are how careers are made and how businesses excel. So how do you master not knowing it all or feeling like an imposter? How do you have the conversations that lead to trust and, of course, excellence? How do you take charge of the things that you can control? How do you thrive outside your comfort zone? That's what this podcast is about. I'm your host, Wanda Wallace, and it's time to get out of your comfort zone. Welcome to the conversation. All right, so today I want to talk about super performers, people who create super performing teams and who have a super performance for themselves. Now, before you start worrying, this is not about spending more hours or never getting any sleep or taking on 15,000 more tasks than you should have taken on. None of that is going to drive you to super performance, at least not what we're talking about today. It might short term, but it isn't sustainable. So we're talking about something different. We want to focus on how do you supercharge your impact so that you're having the kind of impact that really makes a difference. And I think you're going to find out that this advice is a little bit surprising. So my guest today is George Pesansky. He's a seasoned expert in operational excellence with a career spanning 3 decades in leadership, executive coaching, and performance optimization. And George is committed to improving outcomes, and his strategic, action-oriented mindset have made him very sought after. I think you're going to see this as we talk through this. The organization is Capacity to Care, a nonprofit organization dedicated to encouraging super performers to donate their talent, not just their time, to create better outcomes for their communities as well. So George, welcome to the conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me, Wanda. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure. Look, there are a lot of people who talk about this notion of how do you have the biggest impact and how do you be super, and there's a bunch of them. I have to say, your approach has surprised me a tad bit. It wasn't what I was expecting, and I think that's a good thing.
Okay.
So start at the top. Why do you care about this topic of super performance?
Yeah, well, it starts, almost 30 years ago, recognizing that to be successful, I needed to rely on the people around me, not just on the skill or the capabilities that I had, and learning about how to try to get the most from the folks that you're working with, not just focusing on your own skill set, was kind of the seed that was planted for me that really ended up becoming my practice and really is what the book Super Performance coming out in September is all about.
Okay, so getting the best out of your team. All right. So have we been thinking about this, how to get the best out of the team, wrong in some way? Like what have we, this is not a new topic, but what have we been missing in this topic?
I don't know that it's always missing, but I think it's underemphasized. And I like, using this analogy of, coaching a youth sports team and being the coach who kind of tells the kids that you need to score more runs, you need to score more goals, and hey, look, we'll win. A lot of organizations, a lot of leaders focus on the metric that tells us whether we're winning or losing. And there's entire books written on KPIs and how to accomplish this. The reality is, if you think about those kids just trying to have a good time and win their game, what they need is a coach that's helping them understand the technique, how to raise their elbow a little bit, how to, kind of aim for the right part of that goal. And the leading indicators are the ones that tend to really drive our performance. And when we think about where we have the most success in our leading indicators, being able to really expand and capitalize on that is what we have found to be almost a secret formula. Some people have referred to it as the best kept secret in manufacturing. And that's what our entire practice has been built on.
So leading indicators, give me an example. What does that look like?
Yeah, so if you think about a manufacturing example like downtime, how much time a piece of equipment is not running, what we'll find is that the cleanliness, how much gunk and dirt and buildup there may be, is going to relate to how often there may be problems or jams or issues. So if I want my equipment to run, then I'm going to care for it, maintain it, inspect it, clean it, and I'm much more likely to get a desirable outcome. You can think of it, as a example from our own health, that if I'd like to improve my blood pressure or reduce my weight, I can't just focus on that blood pressure or what the scale is telling me in the morning. I have to think about what kinds of foods am I eating and how much exercise am I getting. Those are leading indicators that will result in better blood pressure.
So what you're really talking about is whatever failures we have, whether you call them failures or whatever, looking back to understanding what's the root cause of that failure and finding a metric around that as opposed to just looking at the failure number and harassing improvement. Is that?
That's exactly right. And when you think about how much time, energy, effort, there's entire industries built around understanding root cause of failure. I have just a small experience with just a few authors and kind of thought leaders who share my perspective that it isn't just about the root cause of our failure, which is important. It's also about understanding the root cause of our success. And being able, to recognize in a very methodical way, what are those specific contributors, those disproportionate contributors that are really helping us perform at a level that, helps us achieve.
Okay, all right. This is the part that surprises me about the book, and the part that I like about the book, maybe more than anything else, is this notion of understanding why we've succeeded at a root cause depth analysis, the same way we would do a failures. All right, so I'm going to give you a story. I run a team exercise, have run for decades with teams, where I give them a very simple task. It's a, moving people around kind of task. Most senior executive teams, whether they know each other or don't know each other, can get that task done in somewhere to 5 to 6 minutes, and it's pretty instantaneous, pretty smooth, and they turn and look at me, see, aren't we so smart? And then I say, great, you're not finished with the task until you can train everybody on the team to do the task independently. So it's both understanding why you succeeded, transferring knowledge, communicating, understanding how people process information. Okay, problem number one is they can never repeat the success. Zero capability in saying, why did we succeed? Or why did we fail the 2nd, 3rd, 15th, 29th time? What is going on here, George? Why is this?
I think it's a phenomenon that almost comes down to our, the neural pathways in our brains, like the way we think, because we tend to want to focus on the thing that's in our way, the thing that is our barrier, the thing that is preventing us. So leaders, executives, engineers are really, really good at this. Seeing what part of this is not working, what can I do to make it better, what can I change, and I really want to kind of stay moving. It's all like a shark in the water. I want to constantly be working. I constantly want to be moving. And the reality is, when you think about trying to understand what was the fundamental root of what contributed to the success in your example, in your exercise, and helped us with that assembly, helped us with that, that task we were asked to do, it's a very different way of thinking. Now I'm systems thinking versus problem solving or kind of acting. I teach a class in project management, and the most difficult thing about the class is getting people to not be engineers, to actually get them to be planners and to kind of think ahead about risk analysis and all the things that go into great project management, because all they want to do is go out and work on problems. They don't want to take that step back. And that's exactly kind of the muscle that I think your exercise uncovers.
Well, I secretly believe that maybe one of the least understood, least utilized, least developed skills in business today is the systems thinking. I mean, most people don't even understand what it is, let alone have any natural intuition to step back to see the whole pattern, not just the detail that I've got it right in front of me right now. So how do you get people who don't think that way to start thinking that way?
Yeah, I love my analogies, and I've used one for years that is around a leaky bucket. I really specialize in helping companies with their improvement programs, helping them, with operational excellence and things like that. And there's so many other companies that do the same things. And we all focus on adding value, on creating savings and sort of improving efficiencies. And there's so much there. And if I think of that like a bucket where I'm trying to kind of fill that bucket with value, everyone measures how much are we putting into that bucket. What very few organizations measure is how fast the bucket is leaking. And that is kind of the systems thinking part that we really want to emphasize. And to the disappointment of a lot of large consulting companies, I've really been successful in helping really large organizations see that they can do less and get more. Because if I'm putting all of my effort into putting all that water in the bucket and it's leaking everywhere, it's a lot of lost time, a lot of lost money, a lot of lost energy, and I'm not really gaining anything. But if I slow down and pick the right things to add, but more importantly, the point you're making, really focus on the systems of how I kind of maintain what really helps me be successful and how do I prevent the leaks in that bucket. What we find is we start to really incrementally improve, and we start to kind of climb that ladder that every organization wants to climb.
Right. So it is looking at the system, the whole, the entire thing, both from what is it that's really making us successful, what are the key drivers for that, as well as what is it that's preventing us from being successful. So I'm looking at what I fill into the bucket, and I'm looking at what come out of the bucket in a simplistic way.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I got to look at the whole bucket. I can't just look at the program I'm pouring in or the pitcher that I'm using to pour something in.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have tactics for how you get people started on this journey?
Yeah, there's, I think a lot around the people and the empowerment. There is such enormous value, not in just kind of key leaders, and it kind of comes back to that initial question you asked me on kind of how did I get started on this journey. I learned more from, an 18-year-old soldier that was, assigned to my tank platoon than I did from anybody else that I interacted with in my military career. And really, really happy to say he even gave me an endorsement on my book here 30 years later. And that's the key. If you're going to see the system, you're going to see the whole, you really want to see the people who are working in it. I think we way too often look at, the process map, we look at the strategy map, we sort of think about the design of the system in this very high level, intricate way. The reality is the leaks are in the work that's being done every day. And being able to create a systematic way of hearing where are those leaks, where are those issues, so that we can address those problems, because we always have to do that, but also learning where are these sort of pockets of excellence happening and how do we double down on that and expand it and grow it and, share it.
Yeah. Okay, I can't resist. What did you learn from the 18-year-old soldier? You have to tell us the story really quickly.
Absolutely. I learned to listen. I learned to listen. That's the most important thing. I was a very young man and I thought I knew everything, and I was very confident in what I was going to do. And they very quickly taught me how little I knew, and thankfully gave me the space to be humble and accept that I didn't know everything I needed. And when I was open-minded and listened to what it is they had to tell me, I actually, for this little exercise activity that I was a part of, I ended up, kind of getting some very high awards. And it wasn't me, it was my team. And that's kind of what got me going on this journey.
I have to tell you, the story is in the book, and I really loved reading the story, of having no skill in this particular area. Something that speaks to my heart is not being an expert leader, and then thinking you know how to lead it and realize you don't know how to lead it. And then you have to get the team together to say, what do we do and how do we do it and what's working. So, and then you end up winning the competition. Yes. Like, it's just incredible, really incredible.
Thank you.
With zero knots. It's a fun story too. I love that. Okay. All right. So there is this pulling on the people who are doing the work.
Yes.
But not everybody doing the work has a good perspective. So how do I start to know who I listen to and who I don't listen to?
Yeah, so it's kind of important to recognize that the people who are doing the work who may not have a good perspective, you have to ask the question, why would they not have a good perspective? And that is information in itself. One of the more popular kind of problem solving techniques really has you focusing on what are the things I know and what are the things I don't know. And it kind of plays into everything that I talk about in the book, and the idea that it's not just about our problems, it's also about our successes. And for that example, if I interact with an employee who may not represent or may not fully appreciate or understand the larger strategy or the details of the tasks or activities, then I have to ask myself, well, what's wrong with the system that educated them? What's wrong with the system that organized the work that they're going to be doing? It's way too easy for us to say that employee is not doing, but the much more difficult thing is to ask, how did the system that created the circumstances for that employee not work? And that's where we can gain replication. And I think it's even an example of the exercise that you explained earlier, that's what you really need to be able to do to replicate things, right? Is to have that systematic way of thinking.
Right. Okay, I'm telling you that I think this systematic thinking is like super important for success today, and we have got to have better ways of teaching people to do it. I find some people have a natural propensity and others just don't think that way. They think very straightforward, what's in front of me, kind of narrow line of sight. All right, so you have what else? I mean, if we look at super performance, what are the qualities that you really look at? So there's this, we look at the successes, we look at the failures as well. We try to see the system. What else is involved in that?
Yeah, well, the point you made earlier of it is not about going out and trying to work harder or work more hours or work with greater intensity. That's not sustainable. And one of the things that we've used as a technique in organizations is something we call the golden hour. And the golden hour is this idea of really looking at a leading measure versus a lagging measure. And the leading measure is, what is the duration of ideal performance? And in a lot of cases, people say, well, I really can't achieve this level of success. For example, your podcast and how successful this is. It's really hard for me to imagine reaching this level of success. But if I think about just one day of your views and likes, and can I really put a lot of effort and intensity into trying to achieve just one day, just 1 hour of that level, it's not getting me to the outcome, but it's getting me closer to that result. And this works in any environment. The golden hour is about extending that period of perfection. And it's most important to be measuring ourselves against ourselves. So I'm not trying to compare myself to somebody who may have a lot more of an advantage or have, a lot more resources. What I'm asking is, can I take what I've done very successfully, understand the reasons why I'm doing it successfully, and then try to be a little bit better tomorrow than I was today? And can I stretch or extend those levels of performance? That mindset is 180 degrees different than most, in manufacturing and most manufacturing organizations, because we tend to measure the failures, the downtime, the defects, the problems that you had during the shift. And nobody walks to their truck at the end of the day thinking, I broke a record. It's my record. I ran for 90 minutes without any problems, and I've never done that before. Really important. And that's what helps me come back tomorrow and do 100 minutes.
Yeah. There's no doubt in my mind that as human beings, and as animals, by the way, that we are more motivated by seeing progress, having success. That positive reinforcement is far more motivating and inspiring to achieve more than anything else. Yet we do tend, as a human species, to focus on the criticism. What failed, what went wrong, as that is the motivating force. And it doesn't work. It just flat out doesn't work. Maybe there's a few occasions where it does work. But at any rate, what you're saying there is, okay, the best I can achieve is running 90 minutes without a problem. Okay? I did it. Great. Can I do 100 minutes tomorrow? Can I do 110 next week? Can I do keep expanding? So finding that ideal performance, understanding what it is in that ideal performance that really led to success, and repeating it. Okay?
And expanding it.
Expanding it.
And also recognizing what are the barriers that are getting in my way and preventing, because there does need to be always some work on failures and prevention. And it's not just kind of looking at the glass half full exclusively, but it's, so common that only thing we do is look at the glass half empty. And we don't really think about expanding on these successes.
Right. Well, and you've talked about where are the leaks in the bucket and what do I do to, prevent those or minimize them or whatever. And you've also talked about the fact that you can't, in a manufacturing facility, can't run consistently for many, many, many minutes on and day out without maintaining the equipment. That is a thing that has to be done. But you put the emphasis on the need for doing it when you're focusing on how do we succeed. Yeah.
And, this kind of comes down to one of the things that is also like a key theme in the book that is kind of a take on one of my favorite authors, Stephen Covey, the how, what, and why. I love helping a team simplify the situation they're in. And I find that those three questions help so much. The one that I think is most often overlooked is the why. We talk about how we want the work done, we know what we want to do, but we don't explain why. And in that example, we want the equipment to be able to run for that 100 minutes or 120 minutes, but why do we need to do that maintenance, or why do we need to do this cleaning? Why do we need to do this inspection? And it kind of comes back to the example you shared earlier, where an employee may not know, that they may not be informed, or they may not have the right perspective. So going and asking doesn't necessarily inform me about them or about something, but what it might inform me is they don't know why they're doing the cleaning. And if they don't know why they're doing the cleaning, then they're not cleaning with meaning. They're not cleaning with purpose. And the purpose is to help the machine run, not to check the block that I did it. And adding that why element is just an incredibly valuable kind of actuator. It's a catalyst.
George, you just said something that sparked for me an insight, which is we can't adequately explain the why until we understand the system.
Yes.
Because why is not about the strategy. Why is about the whole, how the whole works together to achieve a goal defined in the strategy. But until you understand that system, you can't explain to somebody why we're cleaning.
Yeah, exactly. The purpose. And I love using this term utility, because we often talk about value and value added and how much value do I create. And I get that, because obviously the outcome of all of this should be value. So we think about those leading and lagging kind of measures. Well, value is a lagging measure. It's the result of what somebody's willing to pay for. But utility, exactly the point you were making, is the purpose that I have. It's my capability. It is the system that I use. And if I have that capability, if I have that utility, if I have that, leverage of having a solid system, I can create a lot of value, whether that's, increased sales on my sales floor or greater throughput in my manufacturing operation because of that utility.
Okay. It's an interesting idea. I have to think about that one for a minute. You're right. We talk about value all the time, but we don't talk about utility. It's a really important. And I think that gets back to my concept of how do you have impact?
Yes.
You're looking at your utility.
Yes.
Your utility plus the value that utility produces, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. So we have this notion that to do super performance, what I am looking for, or be a super performer, what I am looking for is recognizing what it is that I'm doing that is really leading to success, driving success, like cleaning the machines, and what it is that's really in the way, it's a barrier, like not having the proper cleaning equipment or whatever else it is that there. So the reasons for success and the barriers in the way. I look at that as a whole in a system. I see the system, how they all fit together. I'm able to understand what I need to do, how I need to do it, and why I need to do it, why it contributes to system's success. And then I'm looking for my golden hour. Where's the thing I did really, really well? And can I extend it tomorrow, repeat it tomorrow, extend it tomorrow, a little bit better, a little bit more, a little bit stronger, but not in a rosy-colored glass way, in a realistic systems, how does the system work way.
Exactly. And, one of the things that happens a lot in manufacturing is you have to change from one type of order to another. So we call that a changeover. And it's something that a lot of people try to avoid because it takes time and effort and can be really difficult. There's an entire school of thinking around how to reduce the amount of time it takes to make that change successfully happen. And the ideal outcome is to cut that time 50, 60, 70%, but to actually do it with less effort. Because what you did is eliminated the waste. You eliminated the distance you walked or the number of tools you needed, and you actually made the job easier. So that spirit is exactly the spirit here, is if I have that systems thinking, if I'm eliminating the waste that is preventing me, but I'm also expanding on the things that are working for me, then I really start to have utility in the sense of I know why I'm doing it. I know how to do it in a systematic and repeatable best practice kind of way. And most importantly, I'm focused on the outcome that is going to create that success. And when I can answer those how, what, why questions, and I do it in that sort of sustainable way, you have this utility that is really rare in teams and organizations and individuals. They're the people that everybody wants to have on their team because they know just having them there is going to make a difference.
And they elevate everybody else's performance at the same time in some interesting ways. Okay. All right. So let me give you a hypothetical. Let's imagine we have a hypothetical company, and I'll even put it in the manufacturing business, and let's whatever it is that we're producing, make in your comfort zone. I think it doesn't matter which business we're in. And let's say we've called you in to have you help us understand how to be a super performing group. Where do you start? What are the steps? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, the first step is going to be where the value is being created. I love that Rumpelstiltskin, child's tale of weaving straw into gold. And I think of manufacturing a little bit like that. Raw materials get changed into something people want to pay for, right? Straw changes to gold. So where I start is going to be there. And it's very different than I think a lot of other kind of trainers or consultants or thought leaders would do. I don't want to visit the leaders. I don't really want to see them yet. I want to go see the people who are doing the work, because just like my tank platoon, I'm going to learn more from somebody working on a Sunday night who's been left there by themselves. And it's going to tell me a lot about the systems. It's going to tell me a lot about the training. It's going to tell me a lot about the level of leadership, that frontline leadership, the ones who are making sure value is being created. They are way more important than the senior leadership, because that is where super performers make the biggest impact. Because now what we're doing is we're actually changing the way we do the value creation. We start having that utility at that point. So that's where I'm going to start. And it's really about the people, and then starting to identify where our best practices are that we can share, where our losses and wastes are that we need to improve or change. I think of this activity that you've asked about, I actually call it the improvement factory. So even though you're making a widget or you're making a product or you're selling, software, whatever that is, the reality is you also have another factory that most people ignore, and I call it the improvement factory. And, the raw material is all of the waste and all of the best practice opportunities. The machines are the people who are going to run projects and develop and improve systems. And you have rework, you have mistakes we make. We most importantly have losses where we put a ton of effort into trying to do things, and it turns out that it doesn't sustain. So we end up having it kind of slip through our fingers. So for me, my first steps, and the vast majority of the time I'm going to spend, is where the value is being created and really trying to understand your improvement factory. And once I understand that improvement factory, that's when I want to start seeing more senior leaders. And that's going to help me understand what questions I need to ask them, because I'll have that foundation, that evidence of what's working, what's not working, where success is and where it isn't, so that we can start calibrating from a strategic standpoint where we can go.
Okay. All right. So again, we're back to the same thing. You're looking at the people who are actually doing the work that produces the value. And we're looking at what are we trying to pour into the bucket and what is coming out of the bucket that we didn't want to come out of the bucket. So the successes and the failures, systematically trying to see that whole, identify it, And then we're going to the senior leaders to say, how did we get to this place in the first place, or what was the intention, or, what's the ambition, or some other variation on that theme.
It is. And it's kind of shocking. And I think it's an opportunity for a lot of your listeners to really think about it. When was the last time you sat with somebody who was making sales calls? Or when was the last time that you went out and tried to run one of the machines that are key to the product that you make? And, we can say, well, I'm too busy for that. And there's too many things that are on my plate, too many things that are responsible. But if I'm running a really large organization and I don't know what's preventing that individual operator from more successfully having 100 minutes tomorrow than they did today, I got to question, you really got to convince me what's more important than that, because that's how your company's making its money. And I think sometimes we make a lot of things really important to us, this meeting, this discussion, this session. But the reality is if those machines shut down, if that, sales floor stops taking calls or is not as efficient as it could, we might as well connect it to the lights and just let's turn them all off, right? Nothing else matters.
Yeah. This reminds me of the old days in Walmart when, the phrase usually used to be internal headquarters, a constant reminder that you don't ring the cash registers. And it used to require that every senior manager spend a day a month, if I remember correctly, in a Walmart store somewhere in the world doing a task.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if
there's
a
huge grounding, with that. I don't know. I call it industrial tourism. I can't get enough of actually visiting sites and seeing work being done and learning about it. It's very invigorating.
All right. Strikes me that this is a lovely way, George, you haven't used this word, but we could talk about this as alignment. Because ultimately, your bucket analogy is back to real alignment. What's the stuff I'm pouring out in that is useful? And by the way, what is pouring out the bottom, and how does that all make us better or not better? And I love this idea of the golden hour, because I think that's a thing that every employee can identify with, to recognize that there's a moment when everything seemed to work brilliantly. Whatever I'm doing, brilliantly. Now, why? Like, what barriers weren't there, and what was I doing that was making that work brilliantly? Can I repeat it, and can I extend it a little bit longer? Not to create burnout again, not to work 22 hours a day again, but to say, can I get 10 more minutes of that golden hour?
Absolutely. And it could even extend a little bit further beyond just sort of understanding the root cause of your success. I think, I think about like small businesses. I'm involved with a local small business here as well. And you can have somebody who's extraordinarily talented at their craft. They're an amazing plumber, but their success is in being able to actually fix the plumbing in the house. And then they start a business, and it turns out business is hard. And, understanding, where you sort of find founders who find a CEO because they're technically brilliant, but they don't have, those, executive skills. Those things, I think, are just so incredibly useful for us to recognize sometimes what really is our personal root cause of success, and how do we expand that? And then, again, surround ourselves with the team. How do we get the people around us who close those gaps? And they have those root causes that close my gaps.
Yeah, it's. I'm going to come back to the small company or startup company for just a moment. I think one of the hardest things for founders is they're the visionary, they're the change agent, they're the see the opportunity, and there's a moment in the progression of a company's life where you have to stop having new ideas. Like, you got to stabilize it, you got to produce it, you got to systematize it, you got to focus on the repetition. That is not what most founders love doing. It's not their skill set. And it's so hard for them to stay out of it while somebody else does that, because they're like, I want to do something else. That's, learning when your superpower is actually needed. And what do you do with yourself in the meantime while it's not needed is, I think, also a critical skill here.
It is. My team, I'm so proud of the team I have at My Blended Learning, George.com. It's our, it's the engine that has driven our success for, now almost 25 years. And it is a story in finding people who have very diverse talents and being able to recognize there are things I'm really good at and there's things I'm not good at. And I can spend a lot of time having anxiety and frustration over things I'm not good at, or I can surround myself with somebody who just naturally excels at those skills and be humble enough to listen, right? To listen.
Yeah, I think you have to know, I think there are some skills that you can't afford not to have as a leader. Like there's some baselines that you just got to do. If you're not good at it, you got to get better at it. But you've also got to recognize the power of that skill, the importance of that skill, in order to value somebody who does have it and to tolerate them when you bring them on your team and it's not your skill. That takes some awareness and a little bit of learning. Otherwise, you get kind of sidelined by that one as well. All right. So, George, the book is called Super Performance. I like to kind of twist that into super performers because I think that's how do you create yourself as a super performer or a super performing team. Where do people find you if they want to know more from you?
Yeah, so GeorgePesansky.com. We've got all of our media, articles, podcasts, and really love to connect with everyone. We have the Deliberate Minute where we produce a video newsletter kind of sharing some of these insights and would love to have folks sign up for that. We also have myblendedlearning.com, which is our practice. If you're interested in any of these concepts and like to learn more, we'd always love to hear from you and talk about your opportunity.
Okay, GeorgePesansky.com. Sign up for the 1-minute newsletter. That sounds like appealing to me. And myblendedlearning.com. George, what a great concept. I really do love the book. And I think this notion of the golden hour, plus looking at the reasons, the root causes for success, in addition to the root causes for problems, the system is just magic for performance. Thanks, George. Thanks for joining us. And to my listeners, join us next week for another episode in Getting Out of Your Comfort Zone. We'd love to hear from you. Go to outofthecomfortzone.com, leave us a comment, or comment on any of your platforms. We'd love to be back in touch with you. See you next week.